Hi, I'm author Thea Landen, and today we're going to talk about how to write a great sex scene. First, a little bit about myself. My first book was published in 2012 and then was republished over 10 years later because sometimes the publishing industry works like that. And I've been writing pretty consistently ever since. I started off with small indie presses, which is a great way to get experience. I have no complaints. They all did what they were supposed to do. But eventually I moved to self-publishing because honestly, I like being in complete control over my work. A few years ago, one of my books, Disintegration, won an Independent Publishing Award, aka an IPPY Award, and I've also won some smaller awards here and there for my work. Also, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Many years ago, a long time ago, I used to be a teacher, and I definitely don't do that anymore, but I just wanted to mention that so you know you are in strong, capable hands when it comes to learning how to write a good sex scene. Now, one question I get asked a lot is, why do you write erotica or erotic romance? First, the easy, simple answer, which is, I just wanted to write the stories I wanted to read. The second, longer, slightly more philosophical answer is, I just look at it as another core part of life, and why shouldn't we write about it? It's part of what makes us human. It's going to elicit strong emotional reactions from the reader, which I think is something that we all want. And the way I see it, if you can write about your characters dying, you can write about your characters doing slightly more fun things too. Explicit romance scenes have been around forever. They show up in some of the most esteemed works of literature. Though the language may be a little different, the content is the same. You know what those characters are doing. Then we have what we like to joke around about, the bodice rippers that our grandmothers loved. You know, where the woman is on the cover being ravished by a man with long flowing hair and an open shirt. Those were fun. They served their purpose. Again, the language might be a little different, but we know what they were doing. And then if we're talking about the history of explicit romance, everyone likes to cite 50 Shades of Grey. You can say what you will about the quality of the writing. I won't argue with you there. I've heard it all before. But it really was groundbreaking in that it opened a lot of doors and paved the way for people to freely write and read the stories that they really wanted. And they didn't have to be ashamed about reading it because it was more popular and more mainstream. So I am thankful for that because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now. Throughout this talk, there are going to be two main themes that will show up again and again and again. The first is a lot of the advice I'm going to give about writing a sex scene can be applicable to writing any kind of scene. We're just going to hone in on the romance aspects. The second is, and I'm going to say this so many times, we're going to lose track. Everything is character driven. You need to know your characters well. You need to know who they are, how they feel, what they want, what are their goals, characters. And this goes for any kind of story that you're telling. It doesn't matter if you're writing a 5,000 word short story or a 100,000 word epic fantasy novel. If you want your sex scenes to be especially compelling and effective, you need to know your characters. Now, dive into how to write any kind of scene well. One piece of advice I give a lot of new authors, regardless of what genre their writing is, you need to vary your sentence structure. No one wants to read a whole page of, he did this, she did that, he did this, she did that. It gets very boring very fast. So I suggest experimenting with your sentence length, starting it with different kind of clauses. Bottom line is, you don't want this to sound like a recipe or furniture assembly instructions, because otherwise you are going to lose the attention of your readers so fast. This part might be a little subjective, but a lot of romance writers and editors I've worked with suggest keeping your sentences shorter when it comes to your sex scenes. There's a time and a place for your beautiful, flowery, descriptive prose that goes on for many paragraphs. This might not be it. Shorter, snappier sentences are going to keep the tension high, and you want that in your sex scenes to keep your readers engaged. Next up, use of all 5 senses, which I know you have heard before, but hey, it's good advice for a reason. Most authors have a pretty good handle on sight and how things look and how to describe it, so we're not going to spend too much time there. So let's talk about sound. How your characters talk is a great thing to describe to really bring them to life. And don't forget about all those other sounds they can make. There's a difference between a soft whisper, a harsh growl, a high-pitched moan, and everything in between, and all of those have their different places in different scenes. Now, remember back at the beginning when I let you in on a little secret about how I used to be a teacher? Well, one more secret I'll share is that both my degrees are in music education, so I will put on my little music teacher hat here and say that there is so much you can take into consideration when it comes to describing sound. There's pitch, there's volume, there's tone color. All of those are important to keep in mind to really bring your scenes to life. The sense of touch and what things feel like is so crucial to bringing your characters to life. Some people have smooth skin. Some people have rough skin. What kind does your character have, and what does it say about them? I will also very briefly touch upon the fact that different body parts have different feelings of skin on them, and I will not say anything more there before I get into trouble, but you know what I'm talking about. Keep it in mind when writing your sex scenes. Going to a little bit of a safer topic, clothing is a great thing to describe for touch. There's a difference between a man wearing, say, a silk tie for work or an old cotton t-shirt. What about your female characters? Is she wearing a scratchy lace bra she can't wait to get off? Is she wearing smooth satin panties? And don't forget, touch goes both ways, both for the character doing the touching and the character being touched. Smell and taste often go hand in hand, so we're going to combine them here. To go back to our previous examples, does your character smell like expensive cologne, like he just came out of an important meeting? Does he smell like sweat and moss and grass, like he just came in from working outside? Those might be completely different characters that might be doing completely different things in their upcoming scenes. Now, not to generalize about women, but sometimes they have a wider range of fragrance options. Does she smell like a light floral? Does she smell like something dark and spicy? Does she smell comforting, like vanilla cookies? Again, there is a wide range here. and they can all say different things about a character. Same thing with taste. People can taste a lot of different ways in a lot of different situations, and if you are writing an explicit scene, chances are your characters are going to be tasting something. When your characters kiss, do they taste the food they ate in the previous scene? If you have one of those characters who just came in from working outside, does he taste salty? If he does taste salty, how does the person kissing him feeling about it? Is she repulsed by it? Is she excited about it, wanting more? Don't neglect these senses. When writing anything, at some point you're going to have to pick your tense and your point of view. First person versus third person, past tense versus present tense. It really doesn't matter, but just like when you're writing anything, you need to pick one and be consistent with it throughout. If you've been at this for a while, you've probably heard the phrase head hopping and why most editors say that's a big no-no. In general, you want to stick to one point of view character per scene. Now, that doesn't mean you can't write something with multiple points of view. It just means you need to stick with one of them through the scene, and you need something to signify the switch eventually, whether it's a chapter break, a scene break, some people even just do a blank line, but you need to tell the reader somehow and let them know that the point of view will be switching to another character. This is especially important in sex scenes. Just imagine your reader really getting into this scene. They're seeing, they're feeling, they're experiencing everything you have described so well using the 5 senses that we just talked about. And if all of a sudden it switched to someone else, it is so jarring and it will take them out of the scene. And again, as I said earlier, you want to keep that tension going. You want to keep them turning the pages until the end of the scene, and head hopping is just going to take them out of it. On the topic of point of view and writing anything realistically, I would just like to point out that the vast majority of us are not acrobats. We're not contortionists. In your sex scenes especially, just be very aware of where everyone's body parts are and if they can realistically be seeing, hearing, feeling something. Just to throw out an example, even though you might have described it so beautifully and it will kill you to cut this paragraph, if one character has their head shoved into a pillow, they're not going to see the other character's face at the moment of climax. Again, just an example, but you get what I'm going for. Just be aware of everyone's body and how it's situated around other bodies and what they can realistically be experiencing in that moment. Let's get into the details of characterization, which I did say would come up a lot here. You need to know your characters and how they feel and what they want. How do they feel towards sex and intimacy in general? Are they confident and alluring? Are they a little nervous? Are they really, really excited? Or are they anxious about trying something new? In addition to how your characters feel about sex and intimacy in general, how do they feel about this upcoming scene? Has this been a slow burn where they have been pining for pages and ages and they cannot wait to finally wind up with their love interest? Have they just watched their love interest obliterate a whole lot of enemies and now they're feeling a little apprehensive about sharing a bed with them? How do they feel about the other character in general? Is this friends to lovers? Is this enemies to lovers? Is it a complete stranger that they're getting into bed with? Is it someone that they have been with for 20 years and you can still write a compelling sex scene about that? The possibilities are endless. To go back up to our five senses talk, how do they feel when the other character touches them? Is it a warm touch? Is it a cold touch? Is it a sweaty touch? Are they excited? Are they nervous? Are they some combination of the two? Are they something else completely? It's your story. You tell us. I'm going to spend a little time talking about language choices here, though obviously I can't get too explicit in this setting. But there's euphemisms, there's clinical terms, there's slang, and you need to find what tone works best for you and what you feel most comfortable writing. Euphemisms. You probably want to avoid these. We talked before about the old-fashioned bodice rippers, and we've all heard the jokes about Reginald's throbbing member. No one's really writing like that these days. Just don't. And there are some terrible euphemisms for body parts out there, like love channel, honeypot. Don't. It is the mid-2020s. We can say what we really mean. Probably want to avoid the euphemisms. On the flip side, though, you don't want to sound too clinical. It's okay to call body parts what they are, but just like you didn't want your sex scene sounding like a recipe, you also don't want it to sound like a visit to the doctor's office. So, you may be asking, how do I find that middle ground? And the answer, as always, you guessed it, comes down to characterization. How would the character describe their body parts? Are they very sort of uptight clinical people and only use the words that you would find in the anatomy textbook? Do they think of them as a little raunchy, a little sultry, a little dangerous? Do they vocalize these things or do they keep them to themselves? How do they describe their partner's body parts? All comes down to characterization. Just like writing any other scene in any other book, when it gets to your sex scenes, you should ask yourself, is this scene really necessary? Just a little overview of erotica versus erotic romance and where those lines are. And I know it can get a little fuzzy and there's a bit of a gray area in there sometimes. But generally, erotica is the plot, is the focus of the story, while erotic romance is more about the characters and the other non-sex plot, but it needs a happily ever after ending. I also want to point out that erotica versus erotic romance doesn't have anything to do with word count or length either. You can have a short story that's erotic romance, and you can have a full novel that is erotica. Again, it comes down to what the focus is. So, when planning out your sex scenes, ask yourself, is this necessary? Is it moving the plot along, or is it dragging it down? Is it showing the reader something about these characters that they wouldn't otherwise know? Or is it just getting gratuitous at this point? If it's erotica, very little is gratuitous. You need to know what you're writing and what you're hoping to accomplish. And again, just like with any other genre, if it helps the story, keep it. If not, you might have to make some painful cuts. and to get to the end of, is this scene necessary? And to sort of close this whole talk out, if you don't want to write a sex scene, don't. You can write a perfectly good book without one. It does not bother me. It doesn't offend me. It's not going to offend all of your readers. I will say, though, that you need to be very, very careful when it comes to your marketing and to make it very clear whether your book is closed-door romance or open-door romance. Because if readers think it's one thing and they're expecting one thing and they get the other, they will be very angry with you. And that goes in both directions. This is not a judgment. There are plenty of closed-door romance readers who get upset at sex scenes, and there are plenty of open-door romance readers who have been waiting the whole book to get there, and then it just fades to black. So, be careful with your marketing. Joining me today for this portion of the Writer's Workout Conference. This was a lot of fun, and I hope you learned something about how to write the very best sex scenes you can. My inbox is always open to you. You could always reach out to me at thealanden@gmail.com or through my website, thealanden.com. Thanks again.